Federal government reacts as U.S. places Nigeria on watch list. Central Bank of Nigeria slashes charges on electronic transfer ATM withdrawal from January. In international news, 5 sentenced to death in Saudi Arabia over last year's killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. And in sport, Oshoala Osimhen make top 3 African Player of the Year.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The federal government has rejected the United States placement of Nigeria on its special watch list as a country that engages in severe religious persecution. Minister of Information and Culture Lai Mohammed says there is no basis for Nigeria to be on that list. Mohammed also says the U.S. must have been misled by propaganda on former herder conflict and Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria. Lai Mohammed reiterated that Nigeria enjoyed the freedom to practice their religion. Last Friday, the U.S. listed Nigeria and 5 other countries as nations that perpetrate severe religious violations. In another reaction to the development, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Garba Shehu, says the elites do not want President Buhari to succeed because, quote, you cannot go to him and say, give me oil well, and he will sign papers and give you, end quote. Shehu says the federal government's decision to regulate the social media is an attempt to protect minority and vulnerable groups in the society. Shehu also said the president does not have a cabal, but a group of advisors, ministers, friends, and associates. He said some people have called them a cabal in Nigeria to undermine the administration's efforts. Speaker of the House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila says the 9th National Assembly is not in place to frustrate the efforts of the president. Gbajabiamila says the National Assembly is committed to protecting the interests of the people through a diligent discharge of its legislative duties. The Speaker said this in Lagos while speaking at the end of the year Grassroots Empowerment Program, where he denied claims that the 9th Assembly is a rubber stamp to the executive. The Speaker calls the claim an unfair statement. He said lawmakers would disagree with the executive when necessary. But Gbajabiamila said there will be checks and balances and separation of powers in this new dispensation. The lawmaker said the return of Nigeria's budget cycle to January to December was one of the greatest democratic achievements in the last 20 years. He said the new cycle was a good development for progress, which will enhance budget planning and implementation. Gbajabiamila argued the late passage and signing of budgets were a major impediment to prosper implementation. He said Nigerians should expect a paradigm shift from the new cycle. Justice Mohammed Idris of the Lagos Federal High Court has dismissed an application for bail filed by convicted former Abia Governor Orji Kalu pending the outcome of his appeal against his conviction. Justice Idris held that there was no tangible ground for granting the application. It has countenanced the ground of ill health raised by Kalu, that there is no proof the diseases he mentioned were contagious. On the grounds that the bill would enable Kalu to represent his constituency in the Senate, the judge held that his constituents knew that he was on trial and still voted for him. Kalu had prayed the court to grant him bail from the Ikoyi Custodial Center pending the determination of an appeal against his conviction. Kalu had been sentenced to concurrent jail term of 12 years for a 7 billion naira fraud. EFCC counsel Rotimi Jacobs opposed the bail application by saying it is not a right available to a convict because the presumption of innocence has crystallized into guilt and conviction. He said that such a bail could be granted in a situation where the term of imprisonment would have elapsed before the termination of the appeal. The Central Bank of Nigeria has reduced the charges on electronic transfer, ATM withdrawal, and card maintenance fees. The CBN also removed card maintenance fee on all cards linked to current accounts, while those linked to savings accounts would now be 15 naira per quarter. CBN has removed charges for reactivation or closure of accounts. A charge of 500 naira would now apply to status inquiry at the request of the customer. Banks that fail to follow the new guidelines will face a daily fine of 2 million naira. Coming up, African stories. The United Nations renews peacekeeping mission in DRC. And later, international news. 5 to die for killing Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi last year.
Today, title reach for me to settle blessing. Blessing for you. When this girl first got this my shop called network. Now so on top of NTF4G phone. Now this girl could press. I provoke. I paranoid short in reach what time, eh? The ambulance to make her tell her to make she mash her hat. Come out from my shop. And later I come realize say this girl go snap am. Put her for inside internet. They take her the 2 adverts. Now I make customers that they come with my shop. Blessing, I want make you help me manage my shop number 2.
Madam, but I think Nami and Blessing start work the same time.
Now you and Blessing start work the same time. Blessing, you better start with a T-shirt for top of your 4G MTN phone.
Business makes sense on top super fast and reliable MTN 4G. Join MTN, make you enjoy double data.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. The United Nations Security Council has renewed the mandate of the UN Stabilization Mission known as MONUSCO in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The renewal generated mixed reactions, and Krista Kamringa captures them in this report.
The mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC, known by its French acronym MONUSCO, has been extended to December 20th next year. The UN Security Council unanimously voted to renew its mandate in New York. The resolution, drafted by France, will see the 16,000-strong force continue protecting civilians and supporting the stabilization of DRC's state institutions. This political analyst in Kinshasa welcomed the decision.
I support the extension, but it should be strengthened to deal with armed groups.
But some Congolese from the east of the country are disappointed about the development.
The international community is spending money on initiatives that don't bring any yield. And the MONUSCO case is an example. We have had several UN missions all over the world, and if you were to go one by one, in many cases, it has been failure.
Last month, residents in the eastern town of Beni staged anti-UN protests following an increase in the killing of civilians by rebels. They accused UN peacekeepers of failing to protect them. The UN is now carrying out joint military operations with the Congolese army to wipe out the armed groups. The mission has brought in Brazilian troops to train Congolese forces.
As you know, Brazil and has a lot of equatorial forests also, so they are good with these techniques, and we believe that this is something that could help the FARDC in gaining new skills.
The UN peacekeeping mission began in 1999 after a conflict known as the Second Congo War broke out in eastern DRC. Many Congolese in eastern DRC have been calling for the withdrawal of UN peacekeepers from their area. But the DRC president believes the Blue Helmets still have an important role to play in pacifying the eastern part of his country. The locals in the conflict-prone area only hope that the Security Council's recommendation for the creation of an exit strategy is enforced soon.
Egypt is embarking on plans to upgrade and modernize its railway system. The country's transport ministry says this will involve boosting manpower efficiency and improving maintenance standards of railway infrastructure. Yazur Hakim reports.
A set of new train locomotives arrived from General Electric to Alexandria Seaport. They're a batch from over 110 carriages meant to develop the railway system. They cost $600 million.
We are delivering 110 locomotives today. There is also a 15-year maintenance and spare parts delivery contract for 181 carriages, in addition to upgrading 81 other train carriages and developing them.
Egypt's railway has been neglected for decades. The result is a recurrence of tragic accidents that have killed scores of passengers. An upgrade of the railway system has become a main target for Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's second term in office.
There are several other deals for new locomotives similar to this one with other American companies. We also signed a contract and the carriages are being produced now with Transnational, a Russian-Hungarian company, to deliver 1,300 first, second and third class coaches. They are all high-end coaches with latest technology and comfort facilities for passengers. The cost is $1,160 million.
The overhaul will be done over several stages.
The short-term plan ends in June 2020 when we complete the upgrade of existing locomotives, upgrade our maintenance centers and computerize the ticketing. On the medium term, we will add more coaches, carriages and new railway lines to reach 2 million passengers a day in 2022 from the 800,000 now. The total amount we are spending to completely overhaul the railway and underground metro system, including the stations, ticketing, railway lines, we are talking about spending $100 billion by the year 2024.
It's not just about providing better services, but expanding the railway system as well. This is a very ambitious project by the government. The railway currently serves less than 1 million passengers a day. By 2024, it will be serving over 4 million passengers per day.
Ethiopia has launched its very first satellite into space. The nation's Chinese-backed maiden satellite is called Ethiopia-1 and marks a historic moment for the nation as it seeks to develop its space science sector. Reporter Gurum Chala reports from China's Tuanyuan Satellite Launching Center.
Simply a once-in-a-lifetime historic moment for Ethiopians. The first ETRSS-1 remote sensing satellite is now in orbit. It is from here, China's Taiwan Satellite Launching Center, that Ethiopia has managed to send one of its own to orbit. The Ethiopian delegation has witnessed the overwhelming moment.
I don't know if there is enough words to express my feeling. The only thing I can say is that when I saw our satellite going up, I was in tears.
Back home, millions have watched the launching on TV, and at the Addis Ababa Entoto Observatory Center, many have gathered for a special celebration. This has given hope for rapid growth in space science in Ethiopia.
The most important thing is that this is the first chapter in the space science technology for Ethiopia. I think it also symbolizes the significant partnership Ethiopia enjoys with China.
Right after the launch, Ethiopia's Space Science Institute said ETRSS-1 has already started delivering footages and data as intended.
The control station of Entoto is shown the first image, and starting from now, then we'll proceed to use the application for the end users of the satellite.
ETRSS-1, the most important and first Ethiopian satellite, has been launched through the collaborative work of Chinese and Ethiopian engineers. China has also allowed its most famous launching center to complete this job.
When we return, international news. 5 sentenced to death in Saudi Arabia over last year's killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul. And later, sport. Oshoala Osima make top 3 African Player of the Year award. Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the foreign scene, Saudi Arabia has sentenced 5 persons to death and 3 more to jail terms of 24 years as punishment in the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul, Turkey a year ago. Saudi Deputy Public Prosecutor Shalom al-Shalan read out the verdicts in the trial. He said the court dismissed charges against the remaining 3 of the 11 persons who were on trial and found them not guilty. Khashoggi was a U.S. resident and critic of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom's de facto ruler. After Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in October last year, he never returned. He had gone there for papers ahead of his wedding. His body was reportedly dismembered and removed from the building. His remains have never been found. Shalan said 21 were arrested and 10 were questioned without arrest in the investigation into the murder. Riyadh's criminal court has pronounced the death penalty on 5 individuals whose names have not yet been released. They were sentenced for committing and directly participating in the murder of the victim. The 3 persons sentenced to prison were given various sentences totaling 24 years for their role in covering up this crime and violating the law. The verdict can still be appealed. The U.S. and China reached a Phase 1 deal a week ago that appears to have de-escalated 17 months of trade tensions. This has pushed the penalty tariffs that were to have gone into effect on December the 15th, and many U.S. and Chinese sectors are already benefiting from the agreement. Dan Williams reports from Chicago.
Across America, 'tis the season to buy toys. Nearly half of all US toy sales are made during the holiday period. This year the industry faced a further threat. A 15% tariff was set to be imposed on imported toys from China on December 15th. Those tariffs were avoided following a Phase 1 trade agreement between the US and China.
This really makes or breaks our business.
Scott Friedland runs a toy shop in Chicago.
The tariffs obviously wouldn't have had a big effect on this year because we've already stocked through the end of the year, but where it's really would end up hurting us is the beginning of next year. January, February, March are pretty slow times in the toy industry, so to have those extra costs on top of the already struggling months of the year would be a huge impact for us.
3/4 of all toys and games are made in China. Last year, the United States imported some $18.5 billion worth of toys from China.
Although there will be relief across the industry that the tariffs on toys were not imposed, the threat still caused a range of issues as companies attempted to beat the tariff deadline.
So this is a Space Blaster. It's a replica of an older toy.
Michael Roberts is the owner and president of Regal Toys.
We used to produce products in the United States. We had to go overseas in order to be competitive.
The company dates back to the 1940s and now imports their products from China.
We played a lot more defense in our business than we did offense, so we bought excess inventory to make sure that we could get through the Christmas season without having to raise prices for our consumers. We probably lost 3% off of our bottom line. Those costs come from moving product around to different warehouses because you need extra warehouse space to hold more product.
The threat to the industry remains. Although a Phase 1 trade deal has been agreed, some in the industry fear the next phase talks could break down going forward, and the threat of tariffs could return.
I obviously don't want 25% tariffs, but if they're going to happen, I'd love to have certainty to say this is what's going to be happening. There's a million uncertainties. I really don't appreciate when the government becomes an uncertainty as well.
You have a wonderful day, sir.
For now, for the toy industry, the nightmare before Christmas has been avoided. Toy manufacturers and retailers will hope it stays that way.
East Asia's 3 large economies have released a framework for cooperation. This means the 3 countries will work together to promote their own development and also help other countries in the region. The joint statement set out a number of areas for cooperation, including sustainable economy, eco-environmental protection, and poverty alleviation. Sunye reports from Beijing.
It's the first minister-level meeting in 3 years, and all 3 ministers say Asia's biggest economies are navigating tough economic turf. Japanese Minister of Economy and Trade Hiroshi Kajiyama said 20 years into trilateral cooperation, the 3 countries are facing a volatile trade environment that's increasingly unstable. On that, South Korea agrees. South Korean Minister Son Yong-moon said, as the world economy wobbles, Northeast Asia's collective outlook and measures against unilateralism are more important than ever, a stance all 3 stand fast by.
We all see the world economy under pressure and unilateralism gaining momentum. We are among the world's most important economies. By further opening up trade and investment with one another on a greater scale, we can contribute to world stability.
Zhang said the three ministers also agreed on actively pushing for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, to be signed as scheduled in 2020. They also agreed to accelerate talks of a trilateral free trade agreement.
To boost collaboration, we also look to deepen cooperation in the Pan-Huanghai area and extend our cooperation in e-commerce, energy, as well as issues like an aging population.
The ministers' meetings came one day ahead of President Xi's meeting with South Korea and Japan's leaders, and issues on trade and economy are also expected to top the agenda in the coming summits.
Up next, sport. Oshoala Osimhen make top 3 African Player of the Year award. Please stay with us. Welcome back. This is CNN News and Sport. African football body CAF have announced final 3 nominees for the 2019 African Player of the Year award. The shortlist is cut from 10 players to 3. Niger's Odion Ighalo did not make the final 3. Liverpool stars Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah have both made the final cut after their impressive year that ended with a UEFA Champions League title, UEFA Super Cup, and most recently the Club World Cup. Manchester City star Riyad Mahrez rounds off the nominees list after claiming the AFCON title as well as the Premier League and League Cup with Manchester City. Aziza Toshala also made a top 3 list of contenders for the 2019 CAF Women's Player of the Year award. For the African Youth Player of the Year category, Victor Osimhen and Samuel Chukwueze made the cut, having to slug it out with Ashraf Hakimi of Morocco. The award ceremony takes place in early January. Liverpool defeated Flamengo to win their first ever Club World Cup football title. Roberto Firmino took Liverpool to victory by scoring a goal in extra time to end on 1-0 in the Qatari capital. Liverpool has been allowed to avenge the loss to Flamengo in the 1981 single-game version of this competition.